if you love something and you feel it's worth your time and worth your effort, stick with it.
Welcome. This is Beyond the Game, and my name is Mike Lacey, and I am extremely grateful today that maybe the heartbeat of all of our BYU football teams of the past and maybe even the present, it still shines. Patti Edwards, Coach LaVell Edwards' wife, is here with us, and one of her, should I call you a student, Diana, or...
One of her girls.
One of my daughters.
One of her daughters.
You know, we were talking about that really, I'll go there, but my wife, Diana Lacey, is here with us, and Patti has a special place in our hearts and our BYU experience through football and just BYU. So anyway, thank you for being with us, Patti.
My privilege. Thank you for asking me.
So good to be here.
And maybe we should explain why I'm one of her daughters.
Well, let's do that, because one of the things we've been talking about how great of a leader Coach LaVell Edwards was, and I feel that strongly in my heart. I learned that. He was a phenomenal leader. But the more I look behind the scenes and the relationship you and he have and had, I think that you had a big part in his leadership and in the culture of our team. And let me share one thing that I know and then let you talk about it. Here we are, these big football players. We're in college. We're adults. We're so big and strong. And then we marry our beautiful spouses, and they too are adults, students at BYU. We're all a bunch of little kids at heart. You know what I mean? And Patti, we came together on those teams, and yes, we were big, strong, strapping football players, but in our hearts, we were still maybe LaVell and Patti's children. What were your attitudes or what were your feelings toward your players and especially their spouses when we all came in?
Well, of course, we're excited, always excited for the players that have played for us, but I felt real responsible for the players' wives. When LaVell was in college and played football, I was a wife of a football player. And I didn't like it because I was all alone, and nobody put their arms around me to make me feel good about anything. And so I thought when LaVell became head coach, we've got to fix that. And then Ruth Ann Hudspeth, Tommy Hudspeth's wife, when he was head coach and LaVell was an assistant on his staff, she'd have this little group of meeting with the players' wives once every fall. So when LaVell became head coach, I thought to myself, this is a good thing. This needs to be carried on. And then I thought, these young girls had such a good time dating a football player and going and getting ice cream and laughing and joking. And then I thought, then they married them. And that's a different thing. Ice cream cones aren't important. And so that's why I started it.
Yeah.
Now, I'll have Diana be quiet at this moment when she might bear testimony that what you say is true.
No, Patti would say it's easier to date a football player than it is to marry one, right?
Right. And then it were for three reasons that I thought that was a good thing to do. One is I wanted these girls to be friends. I wanted them to help out when their husbands were on the away trips. And then I wanted them to tell their husbands they needed to get an education and to graduate. And then I just wanted to have fun. And that was the purpose of it. And I think it was successful.
Very. You really brought us together, and there were a lot of us.
Yeah, one time we had 45 wives.
And we'll talk about that. I wanted to share something because when you said that these wives, you wanted them to have fun and everything. When I met Diana in 1980, I came to coach, and I knew we were going to get married about the time that football was starting. So I told him, I said, I don't know whether to get married in December or August or, what should I do? I don't know why I was asking my football coach, but he was there for those kinds of questions. He was just that kind of man.
He picked our wedding date, by the way. August 5th. August 5th. He said 2 weeks before double session.
He said, you'll definitely want to take her to the Holiday Bowl. And you know what? He was absolutely right.
He said, not during the season and not at Christmas. You got to, so we did.
But that leads into, the Holiday Bowl in 1980. Which game was that, Diana?
SMU.
That was the SMU game.
The Miracle Bowl.
They call it the Miracle Bowl. Jim McMahon was our quarterback. We had a wonderful team that was ranked very high in the country. And we were playing SMU, which was, we found out later, like a year or two later, that it was the best our best team money could buy.
That money could buy. Two great running backs.
Oh.
And
Michael Carter on their defensive line was a giant of a man. Mm-hmm. But I want you guys to talk about what it was like going into the conference center in San Diego when the SMU full of young single men go in and then they see our team come in. What was that like, Diana or Patti?
Well, I just remember walking in and seeing the other team walk in on the other side, and they were all staring at us with these kind of funny looks on their face. And I was like, what are they staring at? And then I looked and I realized, all these wives, diaper bags, strollers, and there weren't any, or maybe if there was a wife on the other team, we didn't know. So then I even started laughing. Like, I guess we do look kind of funny.
Well, LaVell would, he often said at these bowl games, we always take more diaper bags and carriages and strollers than we take helmets to these bowl games, because it was true, I remember my son when we played in the Cotton Bowl, mm-hmm. and my son carried her baby into the bowl game, but it was true. We always we did have fun, and the bowl would always provide us with an entertainment room, and other teams sometimes would have the liquor and that, but we always had cereal and milk and graham crackers.
Diaper changing tables on the side.
Yeah.
So, but it was fun.
It was very fun. And you also made sure that we wives had fun while we were there. You took us to Disneyland while they were practicing, so we didn't just sit in a hotel room with our babies.
Well, bowl experiences, when we first started going to the bowls, they were new experiences. So you learn from each bowl of how you can improve and what needs to be done better. And I think we really had a good time.
We did.
I can remember it was the bowl in Memphis. Anyhow, it was bitter, bitter cold. And one of the little wives had her baby, and we were sitting out in the stand, and that little baby was so cold. And we both put our coats around him and huddled it up. And now I think that kid's a doctor someplace. So you go back a long way and remember those little things that are dear and choice. So, but you mentioned the Miracle Bowl. The summer before, Ron Meyer and Cindy Meyer, we were together. Ron and LaVell were coaching an all-star team.
Together?
In Lubbock, Texas. And Cindy and I became very good friends because we had similar hobbies. We both liked to needlepoint, and we liked to have a candle on our table, and all this bit. So after the bowl, and we won, I immediately sat down and wrote her a letter. And I said, I'm really glad we won. But I said, I know how badly you must feel. But I said, let's let the men fight the football battles on the football field. And let's keep friendships away from the football field. And she immediately wrote right back and she said, I agree completely. And so I'm sending you my very, very favorite secret chocolate chip cake recipe. And she did, and it has been a secret. And so I think the best thing about football is the education it provides and the relationship. LaVell wouldn't have been able to go to college if he hadn't had a scholarship. He's one of 14 children.
Wow.
That's right.
And he was the first one to go to college. So it's a marvelous thing.
But speaking of friendships, Patti, I think there's a secret sauce that you either knowingly or unknowingly were spreading in our culture, in our football team, because when you were having these young ladies become friends in the background, all of us who were competing for positions and beating each other up, especially in spring and in August, I think it helped us be a better team when so many of our families were friends.
That's the one thing. I don't know if you remember me telling you this or not, but that's the one thing I would say when we would have our meetings, is that your husbands are going to be competing for the same position, and let them compete on the field, but don't let that make a difference in your relationship with your husband's competitor's wife.
Right. And that was a beautiful thing you did. We'd come over to your house and have your lasagna, and you'd make sure we made friends and that we could stay friends through the season. And so important. It was very important for us.
And you still have friends that you made then.
Yep, still stay in contact.
Patti Edwards, I saw that your maiden name was Covey.
That's right.
And you were raised in Wyoming.
I am a Wyoming girl.
You're a Wyoming girl. So you have to tell me the truth. How did you feel when LaVell had that famous quote after losing in Laramie? I think I'll probably butcher it, but he said, because we lost a tough game, a game that we probably should have won, but it's tough to play in Laramie. And they had some good teams back then. So LaVell said, and this I put it up on my wall, I would rather lose in Laramie and come home to Provo than win and have to stay in Laramie. He had so many good, I think they just came off the top of his head frequently.
Well, he did, and I kind of, I was responsible for that quote being made public, because at that time I was writing for the Herald.
Really?
I had a weekly column for the Daily Herald, and but Sports Illustrated used to have fillers, and if they picked up a filler, then they were supposed to pay you $100.
Ah.
So I wrote that, and Sports Illustrated picked it up. So I'm kind of the one that made me responsible for that.
The truth comes out. How about your family in Wyoming? How did they feel about that?
Well, my family had retired, and then we're living here in Provo. But it was one time I was waiting for the game to start. I was walking around the stadium, and I must have had a phone or something. I don't know what, a radio or something. And the announcer said, well, one thing about it, LaVell can't be all bad because he did marry a Wyoming girl. But I think they came out with LaVell was the most hated man in 2 states, and one of them was Wyoming and the other was Hawaii, because he never lost very many games in those states. In fact, I think this is interesting. When LaVell first started coaching, it was in high school ball. And he coached at Granite High School for 8 years and had, I think, 2 winning seasons.
Oh, wow.
And then he came to BYU as an assistant coach for 10 years. So when LaVell was hired as head coach at BYU, I think he had, in the 18 years, I think he maybe had only 6 winning football seasons. And then when he was hired head coach, in the 29 years that he was head coach, he only had 1 losing football season. So I think there's a real contrast, and I think the message in that contrast is that if you love something and you feel it's worth your time and worth your effort, stick with it. And that success is, of course, the ultimate goal, but you have got to be happy doing what you're doing.
I have a question for you, Patti, because this confused me a little bit. I came from a very successful high school in California, and we were lucky enough to win the Northern California State Championship that year. And when I came to BYU, I was so impressed with our coaching staff, with my teammates. I felt like, wow, this team can really do a lot. And I felt like, wow, we should have these giant goals. And I remember how modest Coach Edwards was. I wondered when he said, well, we'd like to win the WAC this year and we'd like to go to a bowl game. I thought, no, this team is so much better than that. Why was he so underspoken or modest that way? Tell me, because you could tell. Later on, I realized, no, he's built something that he wants a lot more than just.
Yeah. He was able to go to a job that he loved every day of his life.
Wow.
I think that's important for people that are choosing professions, is to choose something that you're excited about, that you love every day of your life when you go to work. I think LaVell's philosophy was less said, less mended. And he dealt
Say
with
that again?
Less said,
less mended.
Less said, less
There's some
mended.
wisdom there. I'm sorry to interrupt, but you're right. Thank you.
But he dealt with the press. And over the 29 years that he was head coach, I think the press was pretty good to him. But I think when he was at high school, Bill Coltrane, who was a journalist, very fine sports, and he did BYU sports. He was a reporter that followed them as well as high school ball. And I guess one night in high school football, LaVell got really, really upset. And a reporter asked him a question, and LaVell jumped on the reporter. And he said, Bill told LaVell, he said, I want you to remember one thing. You may have your glory for one moment in the sun, but they have 365 days to get even with you. And he remembered that. And I think that was really good advice for a young coach.
That's almost like that famous quote, never get in an argument with someone who buys their ink by the barrel.
Yeah.
Don't get in an argument with the press.
The one thing that I think that LaVell has was a marvelous sense of humor. But really, our kids say that I have a better sense of humor.
Really?
Uh-huh.
I believe that.
And one time when we were, chasing the national championship, and magazine and people were here, the whole scenario. And I think it was Sports Illustrated wrote this article about LaVell, and the writer said he's rather a large, chunky fellow with a vision or something. Can't remember the exact quote. And he said, "What does that mean, Pat?" And I said, "It means you're a fat daydreamer." And so, but we had a lot of humor. And then the one thing that was, the children and I always knew we were number one. I mean, he never brought his football worries home. And he had a lot of them. But the minute he crossed that threshold, football wasn't important. And the thing that I appreciated about him is he never forced his sons to play football. He never forced them. He let them make their own choices. So consequently, John skied in high school. He's really a good skier, and for years until he went on their mission, he was a U.S. Olympic ski orthopedic surgeon. And Jim just played basketball, and then, but they chose their own sports. John did run track for BYU, but yeah, and I appreciated that as a mother. So
we all remember Coach Edwards' sense of humor. In fact, we had the pleasure of going on a trip with you and other families to Scotland.
A golf trip to Ireland and Scotland.
Which is just heaven on earth for golfers. But I, not being that great of a golfer, I just broke down laughing when this happened. I hit my approach shot, and I think this was in Scotland or Northern Ireland. It was in Scotland. I kind of pulled my shot so I was a little bit above and to the left of the green in what they call the gorse. So it's the rough.
Yeah.
And so I trudge up this hill to hit my chip shot down onto the green that's maybe 10 feet below me. And LaVell's waiting over. I'm up here. The flag is down here. And LaVell's about 45 degrees away, just waiting on the green for me to chip. So I chipped, but it's the gorse.
Mm-hmm.
And so I shanked it. Yeah, I wanted to forget that word, but I shanked the ball, Patti, and a soft line drive went right at LaVell. And he stepped away. It didn't hit him, but I was embarrassed, like, oh my heavens, who, hits a shot that bad when it's just
when
a
you're
chip
aiming
shot?
This way,
and he says, "Hey,
way.
Mike, I didn't know I was in your direct line of fire." And he was that kind of man that he always had a funny little quip that I could have been angry, like, oh, I did another terrible shot.
Or embarrassed.
Yeah.
Yeah, or embarrassed.
But
certainly.
he never, he really valued the dignity of people. And I think he never tried to embarrass a player, which I appreciated too. But he was an interesting man. And it's going on 8 years now, and it doesn't get better, but it becomes more manageable. I don't have to fight him for the remote on the television.
We miss him, and I can't imagine how much you miss him.
Yeah. I still sometimes when a car drives in my driveway, I think, oh, good, he's coming home.
Oh.
And so, but it becomes more manageable. But the one thing that you mentioned when we were talking previously was about the American Football Coaches' Wives Association.
Yes.
And I think it started with 50 women, and now it's over 3,000. But I think it might be interesting to talk about now, especially since the Harbaugh name is so popular with the Ravens and with the Michigan coach.
Well, and he just signed with the San Diego Chargers to be the head coach. Mm-hmm. So are you talking about his father now?
Jackie, his mother.
Okay.
And his father was an assistant coach at Pittsburgh.
Okay.
At the time that I met them. And when the opposition's team would come in, our wives, our staff, and we would take him to some special place to either take him to dinner to see the sights or anything. And this one day, we were in Park City walking up the street, and Jackie Harbaugh, the mother, said, this is a wonderful thing. This is a wonderful thing to do. And she said, we should do something like this ourselves. And I said, yeah, that is a great idea. So the next fall at the football coaches convention, there were 4 women. We were seated at the table chatting, and I mentioned this Jackie's comment to them. And they said, okay, and that sounds good. And I said, okay, let's get it done. So I organized it. And that day I got Dorothy McLean got a room for us. And so I signed the other 3 women talks to give during the day. There were 50 women at the time. And then, so that was a beginning. And now we have over 3,000 women in the organization. And the main purpose of the association was for camaraderie, kindness, and information.
Let me interrupt for just a second, because I have friends who went into the coaching profession, and we talk about Coach LaVell Edwards' tree and all those coaches that have come under him. But I can't imagine, especially for young coaches, how difficult it is, because almost every other year you're transitioning from this city to that city. This coach got fired, you got elevated to another position. And that would be not only a lonely place perhaps for those coaches, but especially for their families and wives. Mm-hmm. And what a good thing you've done here, or did.
It is good.
To have this wives association.
Because one little girl, when this was first started, she moved 16 times.
Wow.
Been married 20 years and moved 16 times.
See, that's so hard to raise a family.
Yeah, so this, in the organization now, when these moves happen, the coach's wife, there's information of where the good schools are, where the good residential district is, where the good doctors care is. So it's a good thing. But it takes a group to make things successful. No person can ever do anything alone. And I'd see that wonderful name on the stadium that's LaVell's, but boy, he had a lot of help. He hired really good coaches, brilliant coaches, and he let them coach. He had confidence in them. He didn't have an ego as saying, well, it's da. He let them coach.
I saw that, and then I contrasted it with other coaches that I saw. For example, we had a wonderful assistant coach here that went on to other places and was an offensive coordinator. And I just remember I said this in another visit, but that coach was jealous at another school of this offensive coordinator's success and how much the press was lauding him. And you could tell on the body language between the head coach and this ex-BYU, now offensive coordinator then. And the next year he wasn't the offensive coordinator, even though that team did phenomenally well. LaVell, on the other hand, gave his coaches authority, and I never saw him jealous or envious of someone else's
Have an
success.
ego.
Yeah.
The only ego he had was with his golf. And he loved golf. I think that kept his sanity, actually. I did. And he was a good golfer.
Oh, yeah.
He was.
For a small amount of time that he played, he was a really good golfer. But I think that kept his sanity. And now I became involved with the Boys and Girls Club of Utah County in 1999. And after he retired, then he became involved in it. And he started this golf tournament.
Oh.
For the Boys and Girls Club, which is great. And so we're going to have that again in May. And I'll put a plug in for the Boys and Girls Club here, because every bit of money that we raise for the Boys and Girls Club stays in Utah County. And in the club, the kids that attend the club 100% of them graduate from high school,
Wow.
whereas statewide only 87% graduate
Real?
from high school.
That's a good statistic.
So it's a good thing. And so when he retired, he was busy doing good things for the community, not just golfing.
That's amazing.
So it was good.
And whenever I saw him, and I saw him in various circumstances, he'd always take the time to shake your hand, put his arm around you. And I saw that with other ex-players or friends that he always had that generous smile and that friendly arm to put around you.
Well, he had the capacity of, like I said, that the guys fight the battle on the football field, but after the game was over, he had the capacity of being friends with the coaches, other coaches.
Yeah.
And when Rich Brooks, who was coaching at Oregon, and they played here, and they probably got robbed, you know, the referees, how sometimes they make mistakes, but we won the game. And
That's the only time I've ever heard of referees being in favor. No, I'm kidding.
But anyhow, Rich came out on the center of the field, just madder than heck. And LaVell put his hand on his shoulder. He said, well, look at it this way, Rich. You only get them once this year. I get them the rest of the year. And Rich started laughing and said, oh, go on. And they're good friends. They were
LaVell.
good friends. And then Ron McBride and LaVell are good friends. And Vicki and I just talked to her yesterday. We get together twice a month for lunch. When she's in town, she's a gadabout. But you make your friendships. And that's one of the best things about football, because it's a roller coaster road.
It is.
I mean, you're up or you're down. And you never can take anything personal, because it is hard. It is really a hard profession, because you're not just pleasing one person, you're pleasing thousands of fans. And you have to recognize that if you do the very best you can, that's all you can do, you know. And the wives, and I'm not patting myself on the back, but I really believe that coaches' wives have to be special,
I think they do.
because they live in a turmoil world. You know, you're never.
There's never
You don't
any
have any
security.
privacy. If your husband is successful and, respected and everything, you don't have any privacy. You really don't. And then I think it's just a woman has to adjust to it or she's miserable.
And Patti, I mean, I think you were in the background pulling a lot of strings, though.
Well, I told him to throw more to the tight end.
I remember that you were, why aren't you throwing to the tight ends? And suddenly,
All of a
Tight
sudden
ends
they
became
did.
a
As the
part
next
of-
tight end.
Chad Lewis.
Oh,
Chad Lewis.
can you imagine? I mean,
History from
where would BYU have more of an advantage than these big, strong, fast guys that don't have to be quarterbacks? All they have to do is beat a linebacker or a strong safety. So tight ends were obviously an advantage for BYU. We tend to get away from that strategy. Will you help our team understand that now?
Well, we're fine. We have a great
No,
team and a great coach. I love Kalani, and
I do too.
He's the man for the job. What people don't realize that there's a pendulum, and things change.
True.
When you and LaVell started the passing game, that was new.
It was.
I mean, people didn't even know. It's always run, run, run. Well, now the defenses are catching up to that. So you've got to have more of a running game to
True.
complement your passing game. And then it's just fun to watch changes that are made, and you just sit and bite your fingernails.
This might be a tender moment, but you told me once, I have a teammate, an ex-teammate, who's very misunderstood or has been or had been. But he's a fan favorite and a team favorite wherever he played, which included the Chicago Bears. And it was touching to me when you told me when LaVell took his fall
and was dying.
Would you please share that special story?
Well, yes, it was Jim.
Jim McMahon.
And he called, and I picked up the phone. He says, "Pat, I want to tell Coach I love him." And I said, "Tell him yourself." And I put the phone up to LaVell's ear, and Jim said, "I love you, Coach, and thank you." And LaVell said, "I love you too, Jim. Take care of yourself." And so, you try to keep people feeling good about themselves. You try and keep them having the dignity that I believe the Lord wants us to have. So, but he was fun. It was a fun roller coaster, and so many advantages have come from it, and everything. A lot of good friends, dear friends, family. But it's now the new generation is there. And Kalani is doing so well. I love his philosophy. He's using a lot of LaVell's skills to build his team.
You can tell that.
Yeah.
But he has difficulties that Rich Brooks and Ron McBride and LaVell never had. And that's called the portal. So, but let's enjoy the now.
Let's enjoy the now.
You would always say that. Let's enjoy
enjoy the now.
There's a certain now that happened in our family that I'd like to share, because Diana put me through my master's degree, and she sacrificed a lot and did not graduate because we were head residents in order to get through school, and then we moved.
We had 2 babies. I was head resident so he could afford masters, and I could only take 6 credits a semester, or it was a rule. So I wasn't quite finished when we left, and I picked up an associate degree. Back then you could get one from BYU, so I at least picked up that. But when we moved back to Utah 10 years ago now, was it that long ago? My goal was to get back into my education. I always wanted to finish. We had 6 kids, and the last one was in high school, and I just wanted to go back. But I was 53, and I didn't know. I was scared about going back to BYU. Things had changed. The technology had changed. But I talked to Patti about it, and Patti, when did you go back to BYU?
Well, I went back to school when I was having a dinner party for my adult children, and they thought they were so much smarter than I am, than I was. Well, I had 3 doctors in the house, and that night, I made a comment. It was like, "Well, Mom." So the very next day, I went down and signed up.
I'm going to show you guys.
I went down and signed up, and then I graduated when I was 63. And the thing that kind of tickled me is, by darn, I got better grades than they did. I really did.
You
but,
did.
I didn't have to worry about a scholarship. I didn't have to worry about going out on the job market. All I had to worry about was having fun. And I did. And then on graduation day, it was so fun because you have your own little study groups, And, of course, they're all much younger than I am. But I was studying between them. And as I went across the stage to get my diploma, Rex Lee kind of made an extra effort of congratulating me. And when I sat down, Tom said, why did you get an extra handshake from the president? I said, "Oh, we're just great friends." I said, "We go back a long way." And he said, Edwards. He said, "Is just LaVell your husband?" And I said, "Yeah, he is." And so he reached across me. I was in the middle of him and pointed at this kid. And he said, "Do you know who Pat's husband is?" And he said, "No." And he said, "LaVell Edwards." And the kid said, Well, who's he? That really made graduation fun. I did great.
But Patti, you were so kind in your lauding of Diana, because I remember when an adult, when she graduated, her mom and dad were so happy for her.
My mom and dad came. Mike's parents came. I don't know how many grandkids, 12. I don't know how many we had at the time, 10. And there were 3 people who gave me a graduation present. My mom, my mother-in-law, and Patti. And Patti mentored me I think it took me 4 years to finish because I didn't go full time.
Yeah.
And every time I'd get a little worried, she would just remind me of,
Well, I love you.
oh, and I love you.
you.
And
Well-
you gave me a little bee and I see you're wearing your bee, your
Yeah.
little,
This is
Deseret.
my very best friend. I've had him up before, right when LaVell first became head coach. And it opens a lot of conversations for me because most of the profession we were in, they're very limited LDS people, And they say, oh, no matter what jewelry I would have on, they'd always say, I see your little bee. And I'd say, well, we Mormons are busy little bees. And they say, oh, that's right, the word of wisdom. And I said, no, yeah. I said, that goes with it. But I said, there's so much more that our religion has other than the word of wisdom. I said, do you want to hear about the Godhead? Do you want to do this? Or do you want to know about tithing? And so it really has been a missionary tool for me.
It was impressive when LaVell retired, you and he went on a mission to New York.
We did.
How did that go?
It was great.
Famous Coach Edwards and his wife, Patti. I mean, were people turning their heads or?
Well, it was surprising to me because he was recognized. But the thing that it did more than anything for me, 2 things, is that the Lord knows where he needs you to be and with what people he needs you to be with. And so that's why we went to New York. And then it just strengthened my testimony more all the time. And he was very beneficial in opening the Harlem branch.
Really?
When we went there, they just had a little Quonset hut. And then when we left, they have a 5-story church building now and 3 wards that are in it.
Wow.
All for this, because of this football involvement. Because when he went out there, this Duke Ferguson, and he was a former pro football player from San Diego State, knew him and asked him if he could help get it organized. And he did. And so he was able to LaVell helped him get the organizational. And, you have to New York has a lot of red tapes.
Oh, yeah.
And so you'd have to cut all those red tapes or go get them all approved. And then the kids were practicing on an open field with broken glass and everything, and they didn't even know how to put a helmet on. So he got uniforms from the NFL.
Wow.
And so,
interesting.
So yeah, it was really great. But LaVell and I would go twice a month out to Harlem to their community meetings, and it was wonderful. We were welcomed, but he was meant to be there at that time. And the first game they played an all-white school, and didn't get one touch. I don't even think got first down. But that school took up a collection for this black school. And now the 3rd year that team was in progress, no, the 4th year the team was in progress, there were 3 kids that got scholarships.
Really? That went to play?
That would have been lost in the tracks.
Wow.
And we met with Senator Schumer.
Chuck Schumer.
And Charles,
Grassley?
congressman from Harlem.
Oh,
And the Supreme Court justice, who was not a Supreme Court justice at that time. But we all had a banquet there and kind of were talking about things, and it opened doors for us in Harlem.
you and LaVell were ambassadors.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was kind of our mission.
Yeah.
Good, goodwill thing, good things, and it was fun. We loved it. I think we saw her play on Broadway.
Wow.
That's a
That
good
would've been
catch.
So fun.
But I do have a bit of advice.
Okay.
Two things you must remember:
Advice from
Advice.
Patti
Patti
Edwards.
to enjoy the now.
Enjoy the
The now.
now.
Really, I'm serious about that, because that's all you have. It's just right now. And the other is I think it's an East Indian proverb. And if it's not right in the end, it won't be the end until it's right.
I remember you sharing that.
Wow.
I love that, Patti.
Yeah.
That's a little bit complicated for those of us who used to play football.
I don't think so. And that's another thing. When I first started becoming involved in football, he used to gripe me because the fans that didn't know much, thought they were just a big bunch of dumb kids. And no way.
A lot of smart.
You learned a lot. You didn't like football at
Oh, I
first,
hated football.
You know? Then you learned something.
But I thought, if I'm going to be married to this guy, I better jump on board. And I did.
You did.
Wow.
Jumped on it with both feet.
And we're grateful for
Fantastic.
that.
So thank you. Thank you.
Patti Edwards, thank you so much. This has been a joy for us. Again, the heartbeat of our football family,
Yep. She was the heart of the team.
and we love you. Thank you for
Thank you.
all that you've done.
We love you
and do.
dearly.
Thank you. I
Thank
love
you for
you guys.
being here.